Good morning and welcome back. So, this morning we're going to talk about feminine power, hidden and revealed. I'm very excited about this because I'm going to talk about the Nag Hammadi today and the different stories that the different stories that the Nag Hammadi presents of stories that we've been told one way, they show up there another way. So I'm very excited to share this with you. When I found this for myself, it just seemed so powerful in such a revision of the way that I was perceiving the feminine, specifically religiously. But as I've talked about before, it's religion permeates our society, our culture, and whether we're Christian or not, whether we reject it or not, it's still kind of embedded in our culture. And right now we can see that this way of thinking is really coming up in the collective. It's really being brought to the surface. This in particular is a time when things that have been hidden are being revealed. And this is one of the things that is coming up, not just to be seen, but to actually be transformed. So I think that talking about this in a different way can be helpful, possibly. We talked before about the abduction, which specifically is often referring to Persephone, like that we see that as her being abducted by Hades and taken to the underworld. And I've talked about how that's kind of a cyclical thing, and that we're in the fifth Renaissance, according to Kovacs, in this time when this information that was hidden and has been in the past is coming to the surface in order to be embodied and integrated, in order to shift our consciousness as a collective into the new consciousness, to take it on. And that is a consciousness of equality. It is not a consciousness of domination and manipulation and I'm better than you and all of that. One of the ways that we have been conditioned is through religion, and Eve, we were taught, was the cause of the fall and booted from the garden. But what we see in that story as well in Revelation, which is interesting because that word means like one. Revelation, it's not revelations, it's one. So one thing is being revealed. And in the end, God says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. So that makes it into a circle. And here we have again kind of the cyclical nature of consciousness and of humanity, really, and humanity's consciousness. So it kind of emphasizes again that idea of something, of things changing. There's this story called The Maiden of the Wells, or about the Maiden of the Wells. So it dates back to ancient Mesopotamia, which was about 6,000 years ago. And the idea was that they tended the wells. So when the knights were traveling, they would, and travelers were on the road, they could stop at the well, and one of the maidens would bring them food and drinks and kind of nourish them on the journey. Well, what happened was King Amangan was at the well and saw how beautiful the maiden was, and he took advantage of her in not a very nice way. Well, the knights learned from him that this was okay behavior, and so they did it too. They subsequently did it. Well, eventually the maidens were like, yeah, enough of this. They went away. So we would say they went into the unconscious. And when they did that, the wells dried up, which is just like we've talked about with Persephone, right? When the wells dry up, we enter either the wasteland, winter, however you want to see it. So here we see in this story that it happens again because the maidens no longer felt safe in the world. They didn't feel like they were honored and respected and appreciated for what they were offering, but they were taken advantage of. Their boundaries were really invaded. And so this is how the wasteland was created in the King Arthur story. eventually, once Parsifal kind of, and retrieves the Grail, as I've done other videos on that, the new belief becomes that the land and the king are one, which means the inside and the outside are one and the same thing. There's a connection between these two things. And the rape of the maiden in the feminine equals the rape of the land, and what we see now, which is an environmental crisis. We can see that we don't value nature in the way that we need to. We don't respect it. So in order to restore the land, the king had to take a sip from that cup, right? And the way that they got to that was that the knights had to, part of their code of chivalry was to, whenever they encountered a damsel, they had to respect and honor her. So they realized that this had happened. So over time, they were able to rebuild the relationship with the divine feminine and restore the wasteland with the feminine, which is what the story is about. So in religion, we have Eve, who is created from Adam and is this helper. And I quote that word. I didn't just make it up. Women are seen as a problem. They want to dominate men. They're supposed to serve their husbands, and they're supposed to be inferior. But before Eve, there was Lilith. And I could give you the details of like why that makes a lot of sense, but I'm not going to go into all of that today. But so she was there. There's this, many people believe that she was there before Eve, and she had been equal because she and Adam were created from the same thing, which was what, the clay, I think it was. And so they were created together and they were equal. And Adam wanted to be superior to her. He wanted to sleep with her and he wanted her to be on the bottom. And she said, no. She said, I'm not going to be. She said, we're equal. We were created equally. I'm not going to be inferior to you. And they got into a fight and she flew away. She flew away to the desert. And what happened was, she was labeled as evil because, and they say she ate babies. I mean, so the woman who was equal was replaced with the woman who was inferior, and the woman who was to serve the masculine. So Eve and Job's wife were both punished for not listening and for breaking the rules. So the women were punished with pain at childbearing. And okay, so I was like researching this because I wanted to make sure I got it right. And I happened onto a site that was like explaining, and it was unbelievable, the perspective of how women are seen, because this is on the internet, that's a current site, and that it said that women's function, the reason why Eve was punished with pain at childbearing, and women in general, was because her job was giving birth. And so the way that Adam was punished was through toiling, having to work the soil. And that was his job, was to work the soil. So her job was giving babies. And of course, if you are paying attention to politics at all right now, this is something that's up. This is in the air. It's helpful then to see how these ideas have originated. Lilith is the opposite. She knew she was equal because she came from the same source, refused to be less than. Eve was seen as inferior because she was created from Adam's rib. And so Lilith, because she was so uppity, they said she ate the babies while Eve gave birth to the babies. I thought that was interesting. By the way, it's just an aside. I don't think that the pain thing, I'm not a mother, but I don't think I've read lots about it. And there are options to not have it to experience that pain associated with birth. So I think that there are other ways of perceiving this. And who knows if we've taken this mantle in our beliefs, have created this discomfort around giving birth, that we can transcend and we can transform and we can change. again, I'm not saying anything about, there's no judgment here. I'm just saying that when I was looking at becoming a mother, became aware of what other options there were that were supposedly not as painful. And it didn't involve drugs. So because of Adam and Eve, there was sin in there, and as a result of that, there was a conflict with Satan between the sexes and with the soil. So the snake is considered Satan, which Satan, another word for him is Lucifer, which is called the bringer of light. And so through religion, there's this teaching of not questioning or challenging authority. And here that's exactly what happened with that. And as a result, the church and the things that I saw were saying that the masculine can't let the feminine be superior, and he has to kind of retain that superior position. So the man's job is to work the earth, which connects again to the King Arthur myth, right? With the connection between the king and the land. So religion is conditioning through this repetition of a particular narrative that reinforces these particular views and presents women as victims and powerless. So we have news stories coming online, and I've talked a little bit about this, how there's this new wave of information that's coming to the surface from the past. Things like seeing alchemy differently, valuing dreams more and more, the Nag Hammadi texts, the Dead Sea Scrolls, all these things are now coming to the surface in order for us to be able to access this more esoteric information about things that have not been taken esoterically. So in the Nag Hammadi, Adam and Eve were in the garden, and I'm going to read this to you because it's so cool. I just love the way that they talk about it and the things that they say. So I know this is a little different than what I normally do. But so this starts, and I'm starting in the middle of it. So I'm in the creation of Adam and Eve in the nature of the rulers section. The rulers took Adam and put him in the garden that he might cultivate it and watch over it. They commanded him and said, "You may eat from every tree in the garden, but don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Don't touch it, for the day that you eat from it, you will surely die." They said this to him, but they did not understand what they said to him. Rather, by the Father's will, they said this in such a way that Adam might eat and Adam might not perceive them as would a completely material person. The rulers plotted together and said, "Come, let us make a deep sleep fall upon Adam." So Adam slept. The deep sleep they made to fall upon him, and he slept, is ignorance. They cut open his side like a living woman, and they brought out Eve, the living woman. Then they repaired his side with flesh in place of her, and Adam had only a soul. The woman of spirit came to him and spoke with him, saying, "Adam, rise." When he saw her, he said, "You have given me life. You will be called the mother of the living." So right there, we have a little bit of another way of perceiving this story, right? That she is someone who gives life, who breathes life. The Spirit breathes life into things that are not alive, that are not, he wasn't enlivened. And that's what she did, and she brought that to him. So the authorities approached Adam, and when they saw his female partner speaking with him, they became aroused and lusted after her. They said to each other, "Come, let's take advantage of her." You can imagine what they said. I won't read the words. And they chased her. But she laughed at them because of their foolishness and their blindness. In their grasp, she turned into a tree. And when she left for them a shadow of herself that looked like her, they defiled it sexually. They defiled the seal of her voice, and they convicted themselves through the form that they had shaped in their own image. So here, the spirit goes into the tree and she puts something that's a shadow of herself. That's the ego. That's the ego self. And they're defiling the ego self. They're not defiling the spirit self, which is what she truly is. So she goes into the tree. And the tree is the knowledge. It's where the knowledge comes from, which we'll get to. Isn't this interesting? Then the female spiritual presence came in the shape of a serpent. The instructor, the serpent, taught Adam and Eve and said, "What did Samael say to you? Did he say you may eat from every tree in the garden, but don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil?" The woman of flesh said, "Not only did he say, 'Do not eat,' but also, 'Do not touch it, for the day you eat from it, you will surely die.'" The serpent, the instructor, which is the divine feminine, the spirit, said, "You will not surely die, for he said this to you out of jealousy. Rather, your eyes will open, and you will be like gods, knowing good and evil." And the female instructor was taken away from the serpent, and she abandoned it as something of the earth. So that energy came into the snake and spoke to them, instructed them, told them the truth of their being, right? This is the same being that breathed life into Adam. So it's a completely different perspective, just another perspective. These are the stories that didn't get into the Bible. So they were just a bunch of guys who sat in a room and said, well, we'll keep this one and we'll throw this one away. This one was discarded. Fortunately, it was discovered again. Someone, I think it was, the story goes that it was like a priest or somebody, and he buried it when they were coming through and like burning everything. So eventually it was found and rediscovered and came out into came to be shared, I guess, with everybody is the way to say it. So in the next section, they eat from the tree. The woman of flesh took from the tree. So if it's the woman of flesh, then this means this isn't the true Eve. This is kind of the shadow Eve. So the kind of the ego Eve. The woman of flesh took from the tree and ate, and she gave it to her husband as well. And thus these beings who had only a soul, because remember that was Adam, ate. Their imperfections became apparent in their ignorance. They recognized that they were stripped of the spiritual, and they took fig leaves and tied them around their naked bodies. The leader of the archons came and said, "Where are you, Adam?" For he did not know what had happened. Adam said, I heard your voice and was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. The ruler said, "Why did you hide, unless it is because you ate from the only tree from which I commanded you not to eat? You did eat." Adam said, "The woman you gave me offered me the fruit, and I ate." And the arrogant ruler cursed the woman. The woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." The rulers turned to the serpent and cursed its shadow, so that it was powerless, and they did not know it was the form they themselves had shaped. From then on, the serpent was under the curse of the authorities. The curse was on the serpent until the perfect human was to come. The rulers turned to their Adam. They took him and cast him and his wife out of the garden. They have no blessing, for they are also under the curse. The rulers threw humanity into great confusion and a life of toil, so that their people might be, listen to this is crazy, so that their people might be preoccupied with things of the world and not have time to be occupied with the Holy Spirit, right? So the Spirit, which was the true human, the part of themselves that was the truth. So they became distracted. They were distracted with toil and life that is not the truth and the true nature of life and the way it's supposed to be, but to distract us with things of the world in order. So that really speaks to our time, right? There's so much talk right now about things that are so distracting. So in the next section, Eve gives birth to Cain and Abel, and I'm not going to read the whole section. And then they give birth to after one of them dies. I can't remember which one. Um, then she gives birth. Eve gives birth to Seth, and so then she ends up. So at the end, they have 3 sons and 1 daughter. Didn't know about that. That was a surprise. And Eve became pregnant again and gave birth to Noriah. Eve said, "He has produced for me a virgin to help many human generations. Noriah is the virgin whom the forces did not defile." So I'm going to take a break here because to repeat that, she's a virgin to help many generations. She is the virgin whom the forces did not defile. So remember, the rulers did with her mother, which would be Eve. And she represents the virgin. Now, we've been told something about the virgin, that this is telling us what the virgin really means, which is that she's undefiled by the forces of this world. And she's here to help generations. That means, right, she's this kind of divine figure that comes into being. The rulers decide they're going to wipe out humanity. So they tell Noah to build an ark. So Noriah, she's like, okay, well, I want to get on the ark, right? She goes to Noah and says she wants to board the ark, and he wouldn't let her. So she blew on the ark and burned it up, and he had to rebuild it. Again, here's this information about the feminine in a more empowered perspective, a more empowered way of being. And again, she's not, I never saw her in the Bible or heard about her being a part of things. Here's this powerful woman, part of the Noah story that we hear nothing about. The rulers went to meet Noriah, for they planned to seduce her. Their leader said to her, "Your mother Eve came to us." But Noriah turned to them and said, "You are the rulers of darkness, damn you. You did not have sex with my mother, but one of your own ilk. For I am not from you, I am from the world above." I've got chills. Whenever I read this, it makes my hair stand up. The arrogant ruler turned with his might, and his expression was like a blazing fire. He was bold toward her and said, "You must serve us sexually, as your mother Eve did. For I have been given, ... They don't have that part here. But in the next sentence, but Noriah turned with the power of God and called in a loud voice to the Holy One, the God of all, "Help me with these unrighteous rulers and rescue me from their hands now." An angel came down from heaven and said to her, "Why are you calling to God? Why are you so bold towards the Holy Spirit?" Noriah said, "Who are you?" The unrighteous rulers had left her. The angel said, "I am Eleleth, understanding, the great angel who stands before the Holy Spirit. I have been sent to speak with you and rescue you from the hand of the lawless ones, and I shall teach you about your root." The lawless ones are those who don't live according to the law of truth. So they go on to this long discussion. I won't go into the details of that. But what is important about this next section, in this final section, is he says, "Do you think that these rulers have power over you? None of them can overpower the root of truth. For on behalf of the root of truth, a figure has appeared in the last days, and these authorities will be restrained. These authorities cannot defile you or that generation, for your home is with incorruptibility, where the Virgin Spirit dwells, who is superior to the authorities of chaos and this world." So, your spirit is rooted in the home, which is incorruptibility, which is that which is, and again, we've talked about references to timelessness, which is being out of time, which is like the soul, which is what you are, that came into this world, is incorruptible. It's with that part where the rulers cannot touch it. The chaos of the world cannot touch it. And that is where the virgin spirit dwells, right? The virgin spirit, that's what virgin means, something that's pure and untouched by the world of form. Jesus said, I'm in the world, not of the world. And that's what that means. To a degree, then, it's subversive to take back this feminine and to see her as more than just being about childbearing, which is this current narrative. To reclaim the power, as I've been talking about, means taking back the qualities of the feminine. The power is inside. We've been conditioned to believe that power is outside. Power is based on the body and the physical form and how much can you lift, or, what power do you have in the world. But it's not about that. It comes from inside. It's not because of domination, control, or manipulation. That's not the way we get power. Lilith knew she was inherently powerful and she was inherently equal. That is the truth of our being as well. And that is what these things were trying to teach. Remember, a lot of these stories were about the esoteric, the inner life. They weren't about the world. They were about transforming ourselves and coming to understand the truth of our being. Power comes through transforming these, processing the emotions, listening to intuition, transforming our beliefs, and freeing our energy from the limitations that have been conditioned and put on us that are not true. You don't have to take my word for it, but you can explore these subjects. You can ask your dreams. You can ask the universe and ask for clarity and understanding where these things are concerned. I'm not telling you have to believe me or believe this, because the only way you can discover truth is for yourself, inside of yourself, and see what resonates with you and what doesn't. This is merely just to open up the possibility of other ways of seeing things and to understand that these things were handed to us and we don't have to accept them completely, and we can challenge them. And like I said, many have already rejected religion, but the idea is not just that, but to also see differently. And because, like I said, we're really conditioned by it, whether we're consider ourselves religious or not. With judgment comes the idea of this inferiority and superiority. Becoming aware then, right? So that's what domination, manipulation, and control is about, becoming superior. And that's a lot of what we see right now. The challenge is that people are feeling that their authority is challenged. Their control is being challenged, and they're trying to manipulate things to get them back to the way that they want them, so that they feel like they're ones who have the power again. There's a desire not to have equality, and that's what we are moving toward. So as I was saying, with judgment comes this idea of inferiority and superiority. So we want to become aware of this dynamic in ourselves. As I've said before, we have to transform these things inside us so that we can free the culture from these things as well. We're witness to the dynamic inside of ourselves, so we can see it through projection. Like, where are we projecting inferior, superior? Where are we feeling the projection of inferior, superior? Because I've been in this before. You can on both sides, like that I can feel the projection. I can feel when other people are projecting onto me, one or the other. I've experienced both of them. And the same thing, which gets triggered in me, I'm very sensitive, and so I can feel when someone else feels as though they are in one of those positions, and how this part, that the polarity in me rises up. And my guide said this morning that the idea is to become aware of that polarity and how it plays out, and to remain rooted in the truth, which is our equality, and to stay there, then not get sucked into other people's dramas and their psychology, their psyche, that's trying to that creates this opportunity for you to play the opposite role, and then puts them into their role of either inferior or superior. So the true Eve laughed at the rulers because they couldn't touch her, and she knew that. Elaleth told Norea, no one can overcome the root of truth. So what we're doing here, through the fairy tales, through the myths, through these stories, and through these codices in the Nag Hammadi, is understanding that we have truth inside of us that transcends the polarity and the dualities. And we can root in that truth as a way to move through the world. And then we're untouched by the chaos. And what was the other world? The chaos and the authorities. And navigate through our times based on this knowing. So we ground and root in the truth of our being that is neither inferior nor superior. Root in the divine ground of our being with incorruptibility, untouched by the world of form. Guidance in dreams and books that weren't included in the Bible reveal the truth to us. Alchemy, fairy tales, myths, and archetypal stories. You can see why now these stories had concealed the information about how to transform ourselves in order to get back to these truths that are a part of us. These truths live inside of us. And if you pay attention to your dreams over a course of time, you will see that they're actually taking you there. They're actually guiding you there. They're breaking down the limitations of this world and our conditioning in order to take us to these deeper truths so that we can embody them and live from this place. Again, especially important right now as these times become so tumultuous in the world. So these stories teach us to reclaim what's been rejected by the culture, things typically associated with the feminine. Women in the feminine are not less than the masculine. We have power that comes from a restoration of consciousness and an understanding of the deeper truth of our being. This also pertains to men. This isn't really just about women, because true power comes from inside, no matter who we are. And we all need to get into that place of equality so that we're not projecting and being triggered ourselves to living in this sense of polarity of inferior and superior. We can really come out of this, and this isn't based on gender. I hope you enjoyed that. I found these stories to be so powerful. I highly recommend it. This version that I read is the Nag Hammadi Scriptures, and this is edited by Marvin Mayer. I really recommend it. As you can tell, it's somewhat easy to understand. There's a lot of words and things that I haven't dived into, like the archons and all this. You get the general sense of what it's about. So I just read it like that. But yeah, it's fascinating. It's really fascinating. There's story after story of women who are empowered. There's stories just that take a different perspective on things. I think the Gospel of Thomas is in here too, and that's a pretty well known. That's one that's been a little bit more publicized, probably the most well known one. And right now, also the Mary Magdalene one is coming online, and that's in here as well. Can't remember exactly what that one was called. The Mary Magdalene manuscript, something like that. Anyway, this version of it is somewhat easy to understand. You can kind of skip over the parts that are about gods and all of that, and just get the gist of it anyway. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, please share them below in the comments, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Next week, I'm probably not going to be at the same time. I will let you know. I'll try to post on my page what time for next week. Have a great week. Take care.